I'm Richard, 65 years old. Detroit has been my home all my life. Last Christmas Eve, I called my son David. I wanted nothing more than to hear his voice, to invite him home, to sit at the same table we used to share. But he didn't even pause. He didn't hesitate. He said it straight like I was nothing to him. Dad, you're too old for holidays. Stay home. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stared at the gift I'd wrapped for him, paper torn at the edges because my hands aren't steady anymore. And that's when it hit me. He didn't just cancel Christmas, he erased me. You see, I raised that boy alone. After his mother passed, I worked double shifts at the plant in Detroit. Every dollar I saved went to him, his school, his future, his dreams. And for years I thought the sacrifice meant something. But in one sentence, he threw decades into the trash. I sat in my silent house, candles flickering against the walls. No laughter, no family, just me, and the echo of his words cutting through the night. That was the moment my grief turned to something sharper, something colder. Revenge doesn't always come with fire. Sometimes it comes with silence, with precision, with a plan written in ink. So if you've ever been abandoned by the one you gave everything to, stay with me. Because what I did next will make you question what family really means. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, truths people are too afraid to admit, subscribe now. Because silence speaks louder than forgiveness. My name is Richard. I'm 65 years old. Detroit, Michigan has been my home since the day I was born. I wasn't a rich man. I wasn't a famous man. But I was a father. And for me, that was everything. When my wife passed away 3 decades ago, I promised her one thing, that I would raise our son David alone, that I would give him the kind of life we once dreamed of together. So I worked, day after day, night after night. At the auto plant in Detroit, my hands were calloused, my back bent, but every dollar I earned went to him, his food, his school, his future. And for years, I believed that sacrifice meant something. That every overtime shift, every missed Christmas party at the plant, every lonely dinner at my kitchen table would one day be worth it. Because I imagined David standing tall, proud of his father. I imagined him saying, "That's my dad. He gave me everything." But life doesn't always give back. And sometimes the people you love most are the ones who turn their back first. Still, I kept going. For him. Always for him. I built a life of silence and duty, a man made of work, promises, and quiet hope. And I thought just for a moment that was enough, until the day my son decided I was no longer useful. I still remember the winters of Detroit, the way the snow covered the streets like a blanket, the way the city lights flickered against the frozen glass. But most of all, I remember the sound of David's laughter. He was just a boy then, no older than 8. His cheeks red from the cold, his eyes wide with wonder. I'd come home from the plant still in my work boots, hands rough with grease. And he'd run into my arms, dragging me to the living room where the tree stood tall. The smell of pine, the glow of the lights, the gift his mother once wrapped still hanging on a branch like she was watching us. David would tear open the smallest package, his voice echoing through the house. "Dad, look, what Santa brought." And I would smile, tired but alive, because those nights reminded me why I kept going. I'd sit on the couch, his mother's picture on the mantle. I'd whisper, "We did it, honey. He's happy. That's all that matters." Those Christmases weren't grand. No expensive toys, no fancy dinners. But they were ours. Simple, pure, whole. And for years, I believed they would last forever. That no matter how hard life became, he'd never forget the warmth of those nights. But memory is fragile, and children grow. The boy who once laughed under the tree would one day look at me and say, "You're too old for holidays." This Christmas was different. The tree still stood in the corner, but its branches were bare, the lights dim. I hadn't bothered to decorate. Why would I? The table was set for 2, but only one chair was filled. The other stayed empty, staring back at me like a wound that never healed. The clock struck midnight. Its echo bounced off the walls of a house that once carried laughter. Now, only silence. I poured myself a glass of whiskey. The ice cracked louder than my son's voice had been in months. I raised it not in celebration, but in memory. On the mantle, her picture still smiled. My wife, gone 30 years, but somehow closer to me than my own son. I whispered to her, "It's just me tonight. Just me." I looked at the phone waiting. One call, one message, anything. But it never came. Instead, the screen stayed black, like the sky outside, heavy with snow pressing down on this old house in Detroit. The silence was suffocating. I wasn't just alone, I was erased. For the first time in 65 years, Christmas wasn't a holiday. It was a reminder that family can vanish even when they're still alive. And in that silence, I felt something shift. Not joy, not sorrow. Something colder, something sharper. The kind of feeling that doesn't fade with morning light. The kind of feeling that waits for its moment. It was Christmas morning. Snow still fell outside, heavy and silent. I picked up the phone, dialed my son's number, hoping maybe this year would be different. He answered, but his tone was sharp, cold, almost rehearsed. "Daddy said you're too old for holidays. Stay home." Just like that. No pause. No kindness. No trace of the boy who once laughed under the tree. I froze, staring at the wall. The words echoed louder than the clock ticking behind me. Too old. For holidays. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My throat locked my chest heavy. All I could think of was the years I worked double shifts, the meals I skipped, the birthdays I missed all so he could have more. And now, I was nothing more than an obligation he didn't want. I lowered the phone slowly, my hand trembling. The silence on the line was worse than any scream, because it wasn't anger. It wasn't even disappointment. It was dismissal, like I didn't exist. I sat there, the snow piling higher outside my window. Detroit felt colder than it ever had before. That was the moment the last thread between us snapped. And in its place, something else began to grow. Not love, not grief, but a seed of something darker. Something that would take root and one day destroy him. I told myself, maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe he was tired. Maybe the words just slipped. So I sat there, phone in hand, trying to believe my own lie. But then I opened social media, and there he was, David, my son, laughing in a crowded bar in New York City, holiday lights behind him, arms around his friends. The caption burned into my chest, finally free from boring family stuff, free from me. The comments were filled with laughter emojis, celebration. Not one mention of the father who raised him. Not one thought of the man who sat alone in Detroit, staring at a table set for two. I felt my stomach twist. The whiskey in my glass turned sour. The room spun. Humiliation is heavier than grief. It doesn't just hurt, it shames you. It tells you that everything you gave was worthless. I closed my eyes, hearing his laughter echoing across state lines louder than the silence in my house. For 65 years, I carried pride like armor, but in that moment, all I carried was anger. It was quiet, controlled, but it cut deeper than rage ever could. And as the snow kept falling outside, I realized something. This wasn't just neglect. This was erasure. And if he wanted a life free from me, I would give it to him, completely. The house was silent, too silent. I poured another glass of whiskey. The burn didn't comfort me. It only reminded me how empty the room felt. I stared at the photograph on the mantle, my wife, her smile frozen in time, her eyes still watching me, as if asking, "Why are you alone?" I whispered back, "I don't know anymore." The truth is, I gave David everything, every paycheck, every hour of my life, every piece of myself I could carve out. And what did it buy me? Silence, rejection, a seat at a table with no one across from me. I thought of the nights I missed her, the nights I stayed at the plant covered in grease while he slept safe at home. I told myself it was worth it, that someday he'd understand. But staring into that glass, I realized something brutal. Maybe he never cared. Maybe he never saw me. Maybe I was just a wallet with a heartbeat. The thought broke me. My hands shook. The glass slipped, shattering across the floor. I sank to my knees, shards glittering around me like ice. Tears fell hot against the cold silence of Detroit. And in that moment, grief swallowed me whole. But beneath the grief, something darker stirred. A quiet thought, a whisper. If love no longer bound us, then nothing would. I couldn't end the night like that. Not in silence. So I reached for a pen. An old Christmas card sat in the drawer, one I'd bought years ago, just in case. I wrote slowly, carefully, David, no matter what you said, my door's always open. Come home. The ink smudged where my hand shook, but the words were clear. I sealed the envelope, took a picture with my phone, and sent him a message. Son, the table is set. There's still a place for you. I stared at the screen, waiting. The little bubble never appeared. No reply, just silence. Then, a sharp notification. Message failed to deliver. I tried again. The same result. Finally, the truth lit up on the screen. Your number has been blocked. Blocked by my own son. The phone slipped from my hand, crashing onto the floor. My glass tipped, spilling whiskey across the table. It dripped onto the card, the ink bleeding my words, vanishing before they ever reached him. I stood frozen, chest pounding. This wasn't just rejection. This was erasure. The boy I raised had shut me out. Completely. And as the snowstorm raged outside Detroit, something inside me broke. The grief I felt hours earlier hardened. Colder, sharper. No longer a wound, now a weapon. The message was clear. My son had erased me. No words left to say. No door left open. No path left back. I sat in the silence. The phone still on the floor, its screen cracked like the bond between us. And then my eyes drifted to the safe, the old metal box in the corner of the room. Inside, under faded documents, lay my will. I hadn't touched it in years, because I always believed one thing. Everything I built, everything I saved would be his. But that belief was gone, shattered, blocked. I pulled the will from its envelope. The paper trembled in my hands, not from weakness, from clarity. I read his name written in black ink, David Miller, sole heir. My chest tightened, then slowly it eased. For the first time that night, I felt calm, because I knew what had to be done. I whispered into the empty room, erase his name, for good. The words didn't sound angry. They sounded final, like a verdict delivered by a judge. This wasn't about rage anymore. It was about balance, justice. If he wanted freedom from me, then he would have it, completely. The next evening, my phone rang. The same phone he had blocked. For a second, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. I picked it up. Dad David said, his voice smooth, practiced. For a brief moment, my heart wanted to believe it. That maybe he had remembered. That maybe he had changed his mind. But then the truth spilled out. I'm starting a new business. A startup. I need some funding. 50,000 should do it. You always said you'd support me, right? No apology. No mention of Christmas. No regret for the words that cut me apart. Just money. Always money. I sat there in silence, gripping the phone. Not a single word left my lips. He kept talking, filling the void. Invest in me, Dad. Think of it as a legacy. I'll make you proud. Legacy. That word twisted like a knife, because he had already thrown mine away. I let him speak, let him believe I was listening. Every dad he uttered felt hollow like a salesman rehearsing his pitch. Finally he said, so, can I count on you? I whispered only one word. Sure. Not because I meant it, but because in that moment I realized something. The will was already changing. The ink was already drying. And the legacy he begged for would never carry his name. The next morning, Detroit was buried under snow. I brushed off my old coat, locked the door, and drove downtown. The law office sat between two empty storefronts, its windows frosted over. Inside, the air smelled of paper and dust. The secretary looked up startled, as if she hadn't seen me in years. I need to see Mr. Harris, I said. My voice was steady, calm, final. Mr. Harris had been my lawyer for decades. He helped me buy my first house. He drew up my first will when David was still a boy playing with toy cars. When he saw me, he smiled softly. It's been a long time, Richard. What brings you in? I placed the envelope on his desk. My will. The same document I once swore would never change. I want to make an update, I said. He scanned the page, his brow furrowed. You're sure about this? I nodded. I'm done giving to someone who's already erased me. From this day forward, every dollar, every asset goes to the Miller Scholarship Fund. In her name, not his. Silence filled the room. Then the sound of his pen scratching across paper. Every stroke was a cut. Not to me. To David. When it was done, Mr. Harris slid the new document back. Consider it finished. I folded it carefully, slipped it back into the envelope, and for the first time in years, I felt lighter. Revenge doesn't always need fire. Sometimes it's written in ink. That evening, I shoveled the snow from my porch. The air bit through my coat sharp as truth itself. Across the street, Linda watched. She'd lived there nearly as long as I had. She knew the story, the late nights, the sacrifices, the silence that filled this house. She walked over, her boots crunching in the snow. "Richard," she said softly, "I heard your son was in town last week. Did he visit?" I forced a smile. "No, he didn't." Her eyes narrowed, searching my face. She must have seen the change in me, the calm that wasn't really calm, the kind of calm that hides fire. After a pause, she asked the question I knew was coming. "Do you regret it, cutting him out?" For a moment, the world was still. The snow fell heavier, muffling the noise of the city. I looked at her, at the woman who had seen me through decades of grief, and I gave her the only truth left in me. He erased me first. Her breath caught. She wanted to say more, but she didn't, because she understood. Some wounds don't heal. Some choices aren't mistakes. They're corrections. I turned back to my porch shovel in hand, and for the first time, the weight didn't feel so heavy. Because justice, when quiet is still justice. Weeks passed. Detroit's snow began to melt, but my silence stayed. Then one night my phone buzzed. It was David. Not with an apology, with rage. "Dad, what the hell did you do?" I didn't answer. I just listened. His voice cracked, desperate. "I went to the bank. I applied for a loan. They said your assets, your house, your savings were gone. All of it. Transferred." I closed my eyes. I could almost see him standing in some glass office in New York, his perfect suit unraveling at the seams. He shouted again. "Tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't erase me." Erase, that word. The one he threw at me first. Now it came back for him. I finally spoke calm as the winter wind. "I did what you asked, David. You wanted freedom. Now you have it." Silence. Then the sound of him gasping for air, as if the ground had fallen out beneath him. Because he realized it. The inheritance he counted on, the safety net he thought was waiting, was gone. Every dollar, every asset, every piece of my legacy. No longer his, never his. The line went dead, but I sat there steady. Because revenge doesn't need to shout. Sometimes it whispers, and those whispers echo louder than screams. Days later, another call came, but this time his voice wasn't angry. It was broken. "Dad, I found something." I stayed silent. I talked to Mr. Harris. He showed me the old draft of your will. My name was still there. Everything was mine. It was all set until last Christmas. His breath shook through the line. "You kept me in for decades. Even after Mom died. Even after all the fights. You still believed in me until the night I said those words. Too old. For holidays." He choked on them now. The same words that once rolled so easily off his tongue. "Tell me it isn't true," he whispered. "Tell me you didn't erase me because of that." I looked out the window. Snow was falling again over Detroit, soft, endless. And for a moment, I almost felt it the urge to comfort him, to lie, to say it was something else. But lies had built this distance, and truth was the only thing left. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "You erased yourself." The line went quiet. No shouting, no pleading. Just silence. The kind of silence that cuts deeper than any blade. Because he finally understood. His future died the same night he killed our past. A week later, I sat in the small chapel at the edge of Detroit. The pews were old, the wood cracked, but the air was warm. The choir sang Silent Night. Their voices rose gently, filling the empty corners of my heart. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a call. I wasn't staring at an empty chair. I was simply at peace. Because revenge, as bitter as it tastes, isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about balance, correcting the weight of a scale that's been tilted for too long. I thought of my wife, her picture still on the mantle back home, her smile frozen in time. I whispered to her, "It's done. He can't hurt us anymore." No tears fell, no rage burned, only calm. Detroit's winter had never felt so quiet, but this time the silence didn't cut me. It held me. I walked out of the chapel, the snow crunching under my boots. The world looked the same: cold streets, gray skies, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't angry, I wasn't broken, I was accurate, and accuracy felt like justice. As I walked home through the snow, one truth stayed with me. Family isn't always about blood. It's about respect. It's about memory. And when those are gone, sometimes the only thing left is silence. My son thought he erased me with his words, but in the end, he only erased himself. And maybe that's the hardest lesson of all. Not every betrayal comes with shouting. Sometimes it comes with laughter in a bar, or silence on a phone, or a simple phrase that cuts deeper than a knife. I lived it, I carried it, and I answered it. Not with rage, not with noise, but with ink, with choice, with justice. So if you've ever given everything and been left with nothing, you know how sharp that silence feels. You know what it's like to stare at an empty chair waiting for someone who never comes. And maybe you've thought of revenge too. If this story spoke to you, if you felt that sting, that loneliness, that cold truth, then stay. Because there are more stories like mine. Stories people are too afraid to tell. Stories that will make you question what family, loyalty, and justice really mean. Subscribe now. Not for me, but for the silence we all carry. Because sometimes silence deserves a voice.